They told her too young to run a code blue. Then the president's son turned blue in her hands. Here's the question that should keep you up at night if the person who's supposed to save you already knows your name before anyone says it. What else do they know, and what are they willing to hide? It's 2:47 a.m. in Norfolk. Fluorescent lights hum over scuffed linoleum. The air tastes like antiseptic and burnt coffee, and the trauma doors slam open like a breach. A stretcher skids in hard. Suits flood the room with military calm. A heart monitor screams flat. Dr. Riley Shaw, 24, sees a puncture mark on a neck that shouldn't be there. Stay with this to the last second. You'll learn how one overlooked detail can expose an entire machine. If you're watching, hit like and comment your city. The emergency lights snapped back on and washed Trauma Bay 3 in a hard red glow that made everyone look bruised. For a beat, nobody moved. Dana Brooks kept her hands locked on the boy's chest, compressing with the steady rhythm of someone who had done this in ambulances and field tents and crowded hallways where fear got people killed. Riley Shaw crouched near the shattered vial without touching it. The glass pieces glittered like teeth across the tile. A dark liquid pooled around them, thicker than saline, too slow to spread. It held the light in a way that made her skin tighten. Across the bed, Dr. Grant Vickers stared at the heart monitor like it was reading out his fate. Relief sat on his face, quick and naked, before he shoved it back under the mask of authority. Dana's voice cut through the red haze. "Doc, tell me what you need." Riley's throat felt scraped raw, but the words came out clean. "Naloxone. 4 milligrams. Now." One of the suited agents shifted his hand close to his holster eyes, sweeping the room with practiced precision. His radio hissed once, then went quiet. The silence after that hiss felt deliberate. Vickers scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We do not treat hypotheticals while a patient is dead." "He's not dead yet," Riley said. Vickers turned to her, the kind of turn that was meant to put her back in her place. "Dr. Shaw, you are a resident. You are not running this code." Dana did not look at Vickers. She watched Riley instead, as if waiting to see whether Riley would fold. There was history in that look. It was not kindness, it was the recognition you give someone who has been standing on the edge of a cliff for a long time and finally decided to jump. Riley felt her hands shake as she reached for the naloxone kit. She hated that tremor. She hated that her body wanted to broadcast weakness. She pinned the tremor down by giving herself work, by turning fear into steps and steps into survival. Dana kept compressions going. "Pulse check on my count," she said. 1, 2, 3. Riley watched the boy's pupils. Pinpoint. The kind of pinpoint that screamed opioids. But the rhythm that tried to crawl back onto the monitor was not the typical chaos she expected from a standard cardiac arrest. It had a strange, stuttering pattern, like a heart being forced to remember how to beat under bad instructions. Riley leaned in closer. On the neck, just above the collar line, the puncture sat like a secret. The tissue around it was slightly gray at the edges. Not bruising. Not a clean needle mark. It looked like something had injured the skin from inside, as if whatever entered had burned its way through. She had seen that before. Not in a textbook. Not in an exam question. In her brother. A memory hit sharp and unwanted. Harbor Point's corridor. 3 years ago. Same hospital. Same smell of antiseptic and burnt coffee. Same scuffed linoleum that never seemed to get clean, no matter how many times it was scrubbed. The overhead lights had been white, then not red, but the glare was the same. She had stood outside this exact bay with her palms pressed to the glass, watching a team move around a body she loved. Evan Shaw, 26, strong enough to carry her on his shoulders when she was a kid now, slack on a stretcher like a puppet with cut strings. A nurse had told Riley to sit down. Someone had said overdose. Someone had said tragic. She remembered trying to speak and swallowing the words because she did not know the language of medicine yet. She remembered the puncture mark on Evan's neck and thinking it looked wrong, then looking away because it felt like staring at it would make it real. The attending had followed every protocol. The orders were crisp. The medications were given on time. The compressions were textbook perfect. Evan died anyway. Later, the grief had eaten her alive. It had built a nest in her ribs and refused to leave. It had driven her into residency, into emergency medicine, into nights where the sound of a monitor flatlining made her vision blur and her hands go cold. And for 6 months under Vickers, the grief had been treated like a flaw. Riley blinked back into the present as Dana's compressions continued. The boy's lips were still blue, but there was a faint change in his chest rise when the bag valve mask pushed air in. It was a thin response, but it was something. Riley pushed the naloxone into the IV line. Vickers snapped, "That is not indicated." Riley did not look at him. It is as if he's been dosed with what Vickers demanded, and the anger in his voice had an undertow. Something that did not match the situation. Riley's eyes tracked the pooling liquid on the floor. She had watched epinephrine spill before. It did not look like this. It did not move like this. What was in that vial, she asked. No one answered. The suited agent stepped closer to Vickers. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of authority that did not come from a hospital badge. "Doctor, answer her." Vickers' jaw worked. He looked at the agent, then at Riley, then back at the monitor. Epinephrine, for the code. Riley shook her head once. The crash cart doses are accounted for. Dana's eyes flicked toward the cart. She had already checked it. She did not say it out loud, but the way her hands kept moving told Riley the truth. Nothing was missing. Riley met Vickers' gaze. Then that vial came from somewhere else. The red light made Vickers look older. The lines in his face deeper. His hands were shaking. He tucked them against his coat pockets like he could hide the tremor by pressing it into fabric. Dana called out pulse check. Riley watched the monitor. A weak rhythm flickered. Thin and irregular, but present. "Keep going," Riley said. "Stay on compressions until we stabilize." A resident stood frozen against the wall with wide eyes, as if the entire concept of a resident giving orders had broken his brain. Another resident whispered, "Standard protocol says." Riley cut him off without looking away from the patient. "Standard protocol is for what we understand. This is not that." The suit nearest the door spoke into his radio voice low. Riley caught only pieces. "Lockdown. Perimeter. Identify personnel." Riley's focus narrowed to the boy. A teenage face lashes dark against pale cheeks, hair damp with sweat. He looked young enough to still believe adults knew what they were doing. The monitor's rhythm strengthened by a fraction. His chest rose more willingly under assisted ventilation. Dana exhaled hard. "We're getting him back." Riley should have felt relief. Instead, dread tightened in her gut, because if the boy woke up, he could speak. He could point. He could name whoever had put that needle in his neck, and Vickers had looked relieved when the lights went out. Riley had caught it. She could not unsee it. She moved to the boy's neck again, careful not to disturb evidence. The residue near the puncture was faint yellowish like dried varnish. She had read Evan's autopsy report until the words blurred, searching for meaning where there was none. She remembered a note in the toxicology section, a term she had not understood at the time, a reference to an unusual compound that had not made sense with a typical overdose. Riley swallowed. "This is poison." Dana's hands slowed for a fraction of a second, then continued compressions as if she could outwork fear. "Are you sure?" she asked, and her voice held the weight of experience. Dana had seen mistakes. Dana had seen doctors talk themselves into theories and ruin patients with ego. Riley's answer was not loud, but it was solid. "I'm sure enough to act." The suited agent by the door shifted his stance. "Nobody leaves," he repeated louder this time to the whole room. His gaze landed on Vickers and stayed there. Vickers tried to regain control with his voice. "This is a hospital, not a courtroom. There are processes." Riley looked at him for the first time since pushing naloxone. "Processes did not save my brother." The words slipped out before she could stop them. A stunned quiet followed, as if the bay itself had leaned in. Vickers' eyes narrowed. "Your brother has nothing to do with this." Riley's pulse hammered. "Then why does the puncture mark match his?" Dana's compressions continued. The boy's lips began to regain a hint of color. Not much. Just enough to keep hope alive, which was its own kind of cruelty. Riley's mind flickered back through the last 6 months, the way Vickers had controlled every procedure like a gatekeeper. How he had made sure Riley never got the high-pressure moments that built reputation. How he had assigned her to low-stakes cases during prime trauma hours, relegating her to paperwork and follow-up while others ran the codes. She remembered the first month of residency, the first time she had corrected a medication dose during rounds. She had been right. Vickers had stared at her like she had committed a sin. After that, the humiliations became routine. In front of nurses, he had called her delicate. In front of residents, he had questioned whether she was emotionally stable enough to work in emergency medicine. He never shouted. He did not need to. His voice was precise, surgical. The cruelty was delivered like instruction. And every time she tried to fight back, he did something worse. He smiled and explained with professional calm why she was not ready yet. Why she lacked experience. Why her judgment could not be trusted. He built a story about her that others began to believe. Too young, too emotional, too soft. But tonight, with the boy's heart trying to crawl back into rhythm, Riley understood something sharp and simple. Vickers did not want her to lead because leading meant seeing, and seeing meant noticing details that did not fit the narrative. Riley straightened. Her hands were still shaking, but her voice did not. "Dana, I want blood drawn for tox and preserved properly. I want chain documentation. I want it signed. I want it walked to the lab by security." Vickers cut in. "That is unnecessary." The suited agent answered before Riley could. "It's happening." Vickers' nostrils flared anger, trying to replace fear. "You do not order my staff around." Riley heard herself speak like she was hearing another person. "You are not in command here." The words should have sounded ridiculous from a resident. They did not, because for the first time, Vickers did not argue like a man in control. He argued like a man cornered. Dana spoke without taking her hands off the patient. "Riley, he's trying to breathe." Riley leaned close to the boy's face, watching for signs of spontaneous effort. There was a faint flutter, a struggle, as if his body wanted to inhale but could not find the strength. That did not fit a simple opioid overdose alone. Naloxone helped. But something else was holding him down. A paralytic agent, Riley thought, and the idea made her blood run cold. Paralytics were used in controlled settings in operating rooms and intubations and anesthesia protocols. They were not something a teenager stumbled onto by accident. Someone had done this with intention, and someone in this room had wanted the code to follow standard steps that would miss it. The trauma bay doors burst open again, not with panic this time, but with purpose. A woman stepped in wearing an expensive suit that fit like armor. Secret Service agents flanked her as if they were escorting a head of state. Riley recognized her instantly. Elaine Kincaid, the First Lady, the President's wife. The room shifted at her presence. Even the oxygen seemed to pause. Elaine's eyes swept the bay. They paused on her son, then moved to Vickers, then landed on Riley. She did not look impressed or horrified. She looked like someone assessing an operational failure. "Who's in charge?" Elaine asked. Vickers opened his mouth, already ready to reclaim authority. Riley spoke first. "I am, ma'am, Dr. Riley Shaw." Dana's hands tightened on compressions as if bracing for impact. A resident made a small sound against the wall. Someone else inhaled sharply. Riley could feel the weight of her own choice. In any other night, in any other bay, Vickers would destroy her for that sentence. Elaine studied Riley's face. Her gaze flicked down to Riley's badge, resident, then back up. "How old are you?" Elaine asked. 24, Riley said. Elaine nodded once, young. Riley waited for fear to show on Elaine's face. As she looked at her son, waited for the tremble of a mother seeing her child on the edge of death. Instead, Elaine's expression hardened. Anger sat there controlled and sharp, the kind of anger that did not come from helplessness. Riley felt something in her chest tighten. Anger meant Elaine was not surprised by crisis. It meant she had expectations. The monitor beeped and then shrieked as the rhythm faltered. Dana's compressions did not pause. Her shoulders rolled as she kept the count, keeping the boy's blood moving. Elaine stepped closer to the bed, eyes on the puncture mark for only a fraction of a second, but Riley caught it. Elaine's eyes narrowed like she understood exactly what she was seeing. Elaine looked back at Riley. What happened to my son? Riley did not have time to soften anything. She chose clarity. He was injected. Opioids, yes, but there's something else. His breathing shut down before his heart stopped. There's a puncture mark and necrosis. This looks like poisoning. Vickers snapped. You have no evidence to support. Riley cut him off, voice steady. The toxicology screen will. Elaine's expression did not change. That was the most frightening thing about her. I see. Elaine turned to the suited agent near the door. Clear the room. Riley's spine tightened. Ma'am, I need staff to stabilize him. Elaine's gaze stayed on Riley. The doctor and the nurse stay. Everyone else goes. Vickers protested, stepping forward. Ma'am, I am the attending surgeon. I need to remain with. 2 agents moved in. They did not touch him aggressively, but the message was clear. Vickers was being escorted out like a liability. Dana's eyes met Riley's for half a second. Her look said, keep breathing, keep moving. As the residents filed out, their faces pale and stunned, Riley caught the shift in the room. The bay felt smaller. The air felt heavier. The door shut with a final click that sounded like a lock. Elaine stood with her back straight, hands clasped, her composure too perfect. Dana continued compressions as if she could beat the truth out of the boy's chest. Riley adjusted the IV flow, checked the airway, watched the monitor for any sign of improvement. Noah's heart rate stabilized at 62, then dipped, then returned. Still fragile. Still close to falling apart. Elaine's voice came quietly. How old did you say you are? 24, Riley repeated. Elaine's eyes drifted to Noah, then back to Riley. Too young to understand what you have stepped into. Riley's mouth went dry. Ma'am, your son is stable for now, but I need to know what he was exposed to. If there is anything you can tell me, anything unusual in the last 48 hours. Elaine interrupted. 3 weeks ago. Riley paused. Dana's compressions continued, though she was easing pressure as the rhythm held. Riley heard the change. Dana knew exactly when to lighten compressions without losing momentum. Elaine's voice dropped lower, as if the walls were listening. My son told me he discovered something. Something about his father's campaign. Something that could destroy us. Riley felt her hands tighten around the IV tubing. She forced herself to keep working, to keep the clinical motion steady, because the mind could break if the body stopped. What did he discover? Riley asked. Elaine's eyes held exhaustion now, a rare crack in her armor. The vice president, Malcolm Halden. Money moved through shell companies. Offshore, some tied to defense contractors, some tied to medical procurement. Noah found records, conversations, documents. Dana's compressions faltered for the first time, just a fraction, then resumed. Her voice came out low. He found that and told you. Elaine nodded once. He was going to go public. Riley's thoughts slammed into place like gears catching. Vickers' insistence on standard protocol. His refusal to run talks. His immediate identification of Noah's status. The vial that broke in the dark. The relief on his face. A doctor under pressure who wanted a death to look like an accident. Riley's voice came out as a whisper. Dr. Vickers. Elaine did not answer. She did not need to. Her silence was confirmation. Riley's pulse beat hard in her throat. He's connected to Halden. Elaine's eyes stayed on Noah. My son was told to be quiet. Riley looked up sharply. By who? Elaine's jaw tightened. By me. The admission hit like a blow. Not because it was evil, because it was human. because it was the kind of choice people made when they believed the system was too large to fight. Dana's compressions continued, but her eyes were on Elaine now and they were not sympathetic. Riley adjusted Noah's oxygen again. His chest was moving more now, struggling but not enough. His body wanted to inhale. Something was still blocking it. A paralytic Riley said quietly, mostly to herself. Elaine's gaze sharpened. Explain. Riley kept her voice plain. A drug that prevents muscles from working. If he was given opioids and a paralytic, he would stop breathing. Then his heart would follow. It could look like an overdose. Elaine's eyes flicked to the puncture mark again. Who would do that to him? Riley did not answer because answering would be an accusation with a name. She focused on what she could prove. We need labs. We need the vial preserved. We need to identify the compound. Elaine's voice tightened. The hospital will do what I say. Riley met her gaze. The hospital will do what keeps your son alive. Elaine stared at Riley for a long moment. Then she surprised Riley by letting her hand rest against Noah's hair. Just for a second, her fingers trembled. Then she drew them back as if tenderness was a liability. Elaine spoke softer. You think you are saving him? Riley's jaw tightened. I am saving him. Elaine's lips pressed together. If Noah wakes up, he will speak. Yes, Riley said, because the truth was not optional. Elaine's eyes stayed on Noah. And if he speaks, they will come. Riley's skin prickled. Dana's hands did not stop. Riley thought about the suited agent outside the bay who had ordered nobody leaves. Riley thought about the radio hiss and then silence. A protection detail that moved with military calm. Some of them might be loyal, some of them might not. Her mind flashed again to Evan. The official story, the overdose narrative. How easy it had been for people to accept it. How easy it had been for the hospital to file it away and move on. Riley's voice came out low. My brother was a resident here. He died in this bay. Elaine's eyes flicked up. I know. Riley froze for a fraction of a second. You know, Elaine's face stayed unreadable. We are all briefed on certain things. Riley's stomach tightened. The words tasted wrong. Briefed. Like a dossier. Like intel. Not like a tragedy. Dana's voice cut through Riley's thoughts. Riley, look. Noah's eyelids fluttered. Not a reflex. Not just a twitch. His eyes opened unfocused at first, then trying to lock onto shape and light. The red emergency glow made his pupils look even smaller, but he was awake enough to react. Riley leaned close, voice controlled, calm, the voice she used with terrified families and dying patients. Noah, you're in the hospital. You had trouble breathing. You're safe right now. Can you hear me? Noah's lips moved. No sound at first. Then a rasp. Mom. Elaine's composure fractured. Tears slid down her face, silent at first, then shaking out of her as if they had been trapped behind her ribs all night. I'm here, Elaine whispered, and for the first time she sounded like a mother, not a strategist. You're safe. Riley looked at Elaine and saw the truth in her eyes. Elaine wanted that sentence to be true. Elaine did not believe it was. Noah's gaze shifted weak but purposeful. It landed on Riley. Recognition flickered there, the recognition of someone who knew he had been attacked by people he trusted. His voice came out as a breath. They're coming back. Riley's blood ran cold. Who's coming back? She asked. Noah tried to swallow. His throat worked like it hurt. They said, if I woke up. His eyes widened suddenly, not from pain but from alarm. He stared past Riley's shoulder toward the closed trauma bay door. The handle moved. Once slow testing, then again harder. Dana's hands tightened on the bed rail, her body shifting into a stance Riley recognized from combat medics who had learned that the difference between life and death was sometimes a door that did not hold. Riley turned slightly, placing herself between Noah and the entrance without thinking about it. Her fingers curled around the nearest piece of equipment, not as a tool now, but as something that could buy time. The door rattled again, a controlled violence on the other side, followed by a calm, male voice that carried through the seam. Open up, the voice said, protective detail. Elaine's eyes went flat. Dana's breathing changed shallow and sharp. Riley did not move toward the lock. She looked at Noah's puncture mark at the broken vial on the floor, at the way Vickers had tried to leave, at the way the agents had ordered nobody out, and she understood something simple. Protection was a word that could mean anything. The handle turned again, this time with authority, and the metal latch creaked under pressure. The latch groaned, as if the door itself was trying to make a decision. Riley stood between Noah and the entrance without thinking about it, her fingers closing around the nearest hard object on the cart. Dana's hands stayed close to Noah's chest, not compressing now, but ready, watching the monitor and the door in the same breath. Elaine did not move. She simply stared at the handle like she already knew the shape of the threat on the other side. The voice returned calm and clipped. "Open the door. Protective detail." Riley leaned toward the seam of the door. "Identify yourself." A pause, too clean, as if someone had rehearsed it. "Agent Lucas Kincaid." Elaine's head tilted a fraction. Her eyes hardened, the tears drying on her face like they had never been there. Dana's voice came low for Riley alone. That name means something to her. Riley kept her palm flat against the crash cart. Her mind ran through what she had in reach. Syringes, a scalpel sealed in packaging, IV tubing, a defibrillator. None of it belonged in a fight, but neither did a teenager with a puncture wound on his neck. She raised her voice toward the door. "We are in active resuscitation. You wait." The handle turned again, harder. The metal plate around the lock flexed with a squeal. Elaine's voice cut through the red glow. "Riley, do not open it." Riley did not answer. She watched Dana's posture shift, feet planted, shoulders square, like someone bracing for impact. The door slammed inward. Two men in dark suits entered first, moving in a tight formation that looked nothing like the sloppy urgency of hospital staff. Their eyes swept the room the way soldiers clear a hallway, left corner, right corner, down the center. One of them carried a weapon low at his thigh, close enough to hide behind his leg until the last second. Then the third man stepped through, taller, neat, haircut earpiece, the kind of face you would trust if you saw it behind a podium. He had the same last name as the boy on the bed, and his expression was all controlled professionalism. Lucas Kincaid. He took one look at Elaine and offered a quick nod that belonged at a family dinner, not in a trauma bay. "Ma'am." Elaine's stare could have stripped paint. "Lucas." Dana's breath caught. Oh, hell. Lucas's gaze slid past Elaine to the bed. Noah's eyes were open now, glassy but aware. He tried to inhale and failed, a thin sound in his throat. Riley watched his fingers twitch against the sheet like he was trying to reach for something that was not there. Lucas's hand rose in a slow, practiced motion. A pistol appeared, black and matte, not a showpiece, not a warning. The muzzle tracked toward Noah's chest with a precision that had no room for mercy. Riley's body went cold and hot at the same time. She heard her own voice without recognizing it. "No." Lucas did not glance at her. "Step away from the patient, doctor." Hearing the word doctor from his mouth was wrong, like a stranger using a nickname only her family should know. Dana moved first. She shoved the crash cart, hard metal wheels screeching across the tile, sliding it into the line between the gun and the bed. Her hands were fast, confident. She pulled a syringe from the top tray like she had been waiting for this moment all her life. Lucas' eyes flicked to Dana, then back to Noah. "Nurse, do not interfere." Dana's voice was steady. "You brought a gun into my trauma bay." Elaine's composure shattered and snapped into something sharper. She climbed over the bed rail and threw her body across Noah, shielding him with a ferocity that did not care about optics or suits or headlines. "No," Elaine said the word raw now. "You will not." Lucas' jaw tightened. He aimed around Elaine with a small adjustment, like he had already calculated the angle. Riley felt the old paralysis try to take her, the same helpless freeze from 3 years ago outside the glass doors while her brother died. It crept up her spine, telling her she was too young, too small, outmatched. Then another voice rose in her mind, not a comfort, not a memory she wanted, but a sentence that had been drilled into her by cruelty. In emergency medicine, hesitation kills more people than wrong decisions. Riley's hand shot to the wall panel. She slammed the code button hard enough to sting her palm. The alarm blared a harsh mechanical scream that cut through the bay and out into the hallway. Overhead, a speaker crackled. Riley leaned into it, voice loud, clear. Security breach in Trauma Bay 3, armed intruders, lockdown now. One of Lucas' men took a step toward her gun, still low but ready. Shut her up. Riley snatched the defibrillator paddles off the machine, yanking the cords out to full length. The paddles were heavy cold, meant for saving lives, not threatening them. She held them up anyway, her grip white-knuckled. Back away, Riley said. The absurdity of it hit her, a young doctor with medical equipment facing a firearm. But the threat in her eyes did not come from the paddles. It came from the fact that she had already watched someone die once. It came from the knowledge that if she did nothing, Noah would become another clean narrative written by powerful hands. Lucas' gaze snapped to her for the first time. His eyes were calm, almost apologetic, and that made him more terrifying. Dr. Shaw, hearing her name from him, landed like a hook under her ribs. You know me, Riley said. Lucas's expression did not change. You are on duty tonight. Dana's voice went quiet and dangerous. They planned this. Lucas' eyes flicked to Dana, then to Elaine, shielding Noah. Ma'am, move. Elaine's voice shook with rage. You are my husband's agent. Lucas' mouth tightened. I am assigned to this family, yes. And you are pointing a weapon at my son, Elaine said. Noah's hand twitched weakly under Elaine's shoulder. He forced his head to turn, eyes focusing on Lucas with effort that looked like pain. Noah. Riley said, leaning closer, keeping her body between him and the gun as much as she could. Stay with me. Breathe if you can. Small breaths. Noah's lips moved. A rasp came out. He was there. Elaine lifted her head, eyes wide. Lucas. Lucas' weapon did not waver. Noah stopped talking. Noah swallowed, grimacing. I recorded everything. The words hung in the air like a flare. One of the men behind Lucas stiffened. What did he say? Noah struggled to push himself up, shaking. Elaine tried to hold him down. Noah, please. Noah's voice was still weak, but it had a hard edge now, a teenager's stubbornness turning into steel. Every conversation, every document. It is already uploaded. Lucas' eyes narrowed a fraction. Where? 3 servers, Noah said, and even in his condition he managed a thin, exhausted smile. If I die, it goes public. The 2 men behind Lucas exchanged a look, fast and ugly. Riley saw the shift. The plan had been simple, quick, clean. Noah speaking changed the math. Lucas' voice softened, which did not make it kinder. Noah. You do not understand what you are interfering with. Noah stared at him. I understand you took money. Elaine's breath caught. What? Noah's gaze never left Lucas. They told me. They told me if I woke up you would finish it. Riley felt her stomach drop. Who told you? Noah's eyes flicked to Riley, then to Elaine. People in suits. Not all of them were ours. Dana shifted closer to Riley, syringe raised. We are not letting you do this. Lucas's eyes moved to Dana's syringe and then back to Riley's paddles. This does not end well for either of you. Riley forced her voice to stay steady, then leave. Lucas let out a slow breath. His tone turned professional again, as if he could flatten the moment into procedure. Step away from the patient. Riley did not move, no. Lucas's gaze sharpened. You are making yourself a problem. Riley felt fear ignite into anger. You came into a hospital to kill a child. Elaine's head lifted. Her voice cut through the alarm like a blade. Lucas, look at me. Lucas did not look at her. Elaine's voice dropped quieter, more personal. You ate at my table. Lucas's jaw clenched. For a fraction of a second, his eyes flicked toward Elaine, and Riley saw something like conflict. Then it vanished behind training. Noah sucked in a thin breath. I know who you are, he whispered. Lucas's eyes returned to him. Noah, you are Agent Lucas Kincaid, Noah said. You were supposed to protect me. Lucas' face remained controlled. I am trying to protect the country. Noah's voice rose a little stronger. From what? From the truth. Elaine's eyes widened. Tell me. Noah turned his head toward his mother as much as he could. Mom, he is not just a bodyguard. He is family. Elaine froze. What? Noah's voice cracked. He is Uncle Lucas. The room seemed to tilt. Riley stared at Lucas and saw in the shape of his face the faint echo of Noah's features. It was there, subtle a family line hiding behind a government haircut. Elaine's lips parted. Lucas, she breathed, and the name sounded like a prayer and a curse at once. My sister's son. Dana's voice came out harsh. Jesus. Lucas's gun did not drop. His eyes stayed on Noah, and whatever regret might have lived behind them was drowned by mission. You were never supposed to find it, Lucas said to Noah. Noah blinked slowly. I found it anyway. Riley heard heavy footsteps outside the bay, the thud of bodies moving fast. Voices shouted over the alarm. Security! Back up! Clear the hall! Lucas' men shifted. One moved toward the door, checking the hallway. The other angled toward Riley like he was deciding whether to remove her first. Riley tightened her grip on the paddles. Her arms burned. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips. Dana stepped closer shoulder to shoulder with Riley. Her syringe was still raised a small, ridiculous thing against a pistol, but her stance was pure resolve. You will have to go through both of us, Dana said. Lucas' lips pressed into a flat line. That can be arranged. Elaine's body tightened over Noah. No! Noah's voice rose again, raw but clear. If I die, it goes public in 24 hours. One of Lucas' men hissed, he is bluffing. Noah shook his head slightly. Try me. Lucas held still. His eyes flicked toward the door again, calculating time. Riley watched him do it and felt a cold clarity settle in. Lucas was not improvising. He was deciding which risk he could survive. The door behind them slammed open, and for a second, Riley thought the whole room would explode into gunfire. But it was not the same agents from earlier. These were different, broader, more alert radios barking hands up, weapons drawn but controlled. Drop it, a voice shouted. Lucas turned his head slowly, expression still calm, gun still aimed. Stand down, he said as if he had authority over them. The lead agent near the door stepped forward, and Riley saw the insignia on his jacket. Secret Service, but not Lucas's team. This man's eyes did not recognize Lucas as a leader. They recognized him as a threat. Drop the weapon, the agent repeated. For a split second, Lucas's gaze flicked to Noah. The muzzle of the pistol dipped a hair, then rose again, tightening on Noah's chest. Elaine screamed a sound that tore out of her throat like it had been waiting all night. Dana lunged forward with the syringe aiming for Lucas's neck. Lucas reacted instantly. His gun swung toward Dana. Riley moved without thinking. She slammed the defibrillator paddles together. A bright arc of electricity snapped between them, a crack of white light that filled the bay and stole everyone's night vision. Lucas flinched. His weapon jerked upward, and the shot fired loud and concussive. The bullet punched into the ceiling tile, showering white dust down like ash. In the same instant, the real agent surged forward. Bodies collided. Someone grabbed Lucas from behind and drove him to the floor. His gun skittered across the tile, spinning, stopping near Riley's shoes. Riley kicked it away with a hard shove, sending it under the crash cart. Elaine curled tighter over Noah as if she could block every bullet with her bones. Noah's eyes were wide, terrified, but alive. Dana stumbled back, breathing hard, syringe still in her hand. I am fine, she said quickly, though no one had asked, her voice trembling with adrenaline. Lucas fought on the floor, not wild, not panicked, but desperate in a controlled way. Agents pinned his arms, wrenched his wrists behind his back. Handcuffs clicked shut. Lucas turned his head enough to look at Elaine. His face was slick with sweat, eyes still cold. Ma'am, he said, voice strained. You do not understand. Elaine's voice was ragged. I understand you tried to kill my son. Lucas' jaw flexed. I was ordered. By who? Riley asked, her voice sharp. Lucas' eyes flicked to her. "You are out of your depth, Doctor." Riley stepped closer, defibrillator paddles still in her hands, cords trailing. She stared down at him. "I am exactly where I need to be." An agent hauled Lucas to his feet. Lucas's shoulders sagged for the first time, not with regret, but with the grim knowledge that the room had turned against him. As he was dragged toward the door, he twisted his head back toward Noah. His voice softened, almost gentle. "Noah, you do not know what you are doing." Noah's voice came out hoarse but firm. "I am telling the truth." Lucas' expression tightened. "Truth gets people killed." Riley watched him disappear into the hallway, swallowed by agents and shouting radios. The bay was a mess of motion and sound. Elaine sobbed into Noah's shoulder. Dana leaned against the crash cart, breathing hard, eyes scanning the corners like she expected a second team to come through the walls. Riley moved to Noah's side, hands returning to medicine the way a soldier returns to breathing after a firefight. "Look at me," Riley said to Noah, her voice softer now, controlled. "Stay with me." Noah blinked slowly. His chest rose and fell with assistance, but there was effort now. He was fighting for his own air. Elaine lifted her head, tears streaking her face. She looked at Riley as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "Keep him alive," she whispered, and the command sounded like prayer. Riley nodded once. "I am." A senior agent stepped into the bay, scanning quickly, then approaching Riley with a formality that felt strange under red emergency lights. "Dr. Shaw," he said, "on behalf of the President and the First Lady, thank you for your service tonight." Riley's throat tightened. She wanted to laugh at the absurdity, to cry at the weight of it, to collapse from the adrenaline that still buzzed in her muscles. Instead, she nodded and turned back to Noah's monitor. The rhythm was steady now, fragile, but holding. 62, then 68. Oxygen saturation climbing, slow, stubborn. Dana stepped closer, voice low. "You did not hesitate." Riley kept her eyes on the numbers. "Neither did you." Dana's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "I have seen what hesitation costs." Riley's hands adjusted the ventilator settings. "So have I." The agent started moving evidence, photographing the shattered vial, marking the floor, speaking into radios. Riley watched their gloved hands hover over the broken glass, and her mind snapped back to the moment of darkness, the sound of it shattering Vickers' face. She scanned the doorway, half expecting to see him. The senior surgeon who had tried to bury her under protocol and contempt. He was not there. Riley looked again, searching the hall beyond the agents. The white coat that had always seemed welded to him was gone. His voice was gone. His presence, which used to fill a room with ego, had vanished like smoke. Riley's skin prickled. Dana followed her gaze. "Where is Vickers?" Riley did not answer right away. She stepped closer to the floor near the threshold, careful not to cross the tape the agents were laying down. In the red light, she saw it. A faint smear along the tile, thin and yellowish, the same residue she had seen near Noah's puncture mark. It trailed toward the hallway, subtle enough to miss if you were not looking for it. Riley's stomach tightened. She lifted her eyes to the corridor again. The agents were focused on Lucas, on the weapon, on the chaos of an attempted assassination in a hospital. Riley kept her voice low for Dana alone. "He is not just gone," she said. "He moved with purpose." Dana's gaze sharpened. "Riley." Riley turned back to Noah, because the boy's breathing came first, because medicine was the only thing in the room that still made clean sense. She checked the puncture site again without touching it, watching the skin, the discoloration, the residue that told a story no one wanted written. Noah's eyes flicked toward her. He looked exhausted, broken, but still aware. "You saved me," he whispered, and his voice held something that pierced deeper than any headline. It held fear and gratitude, and the dawning understanding that survival had consequences. Riley's throat tightened. "You did the hard part," she said. "You stayed alive." Elaine reached for Noah's hand, gripping it like a lifeline. She looked at Riley again, and this time her voice carried a different weight, a kind of reluctant respect, edged with urgency. "Doctor," Elaine said, "this cannot be handled like a hospital incident." Riley met her gaze. It already is not. Elaine's eyes flicked toward the doorway, toward the agents, toward the hall that had swallowed Lucas and the violence with him. My son said he uploaded evidence. Riley nodded. He did. Elaine's jaw tightened. Then they will try again. Dana's hand touched Riley's arm, a brief grounding pressure. Focus, Dana murmured. Do one job at a time. Riley exhaled slowly. The monitor beeped steady. Noah's chest rose with more strength now. The bay smelled of ozone from the defibrillator arc, gunpowder antiseptic, and smoke from somewhere beyond the wall. Riley looked down at her hands and realized they were still shaking. She forced them to steady because patients could feel your fear, and fear was contagious. She leaned close to Noah. "Listen to me," she said, voice low, intimate, the tone she used when the room was loud but the moment needed quiet. "If you remember anything at all about where you were when you were injected, who was near you, what you smelled, what you heard, hold on to it. Not for the cameras, for the medicine." Noah blinked slowly. "It was fast," he whispered. "I felt a pinch, then everything slowed down." Elaine closed her eyes for a second, and when she opened them, her anger had returned, controlled, weaponized. The senior agent stepped back into the bay, speaking into his radio. "Federal coordination is en route. Secure the perimeter, nobody in or out without clearance." Riley caught the words "federal coordination" and felt something heavy settle into place. This was no longer a hospital night. This was an operation. Dana's voice stayed low. "They are going to lock this place down." Riley nodded, one eye still on Noah. "Good." Dana's gaze flicked again to the hall. "And Vickers?" Riley did not answer. She adjusted Noah's IV, checked his vitals again, moved with the controlled precision of someone who had turned fear into a checklist. But as she worked, her mind kept returning to the empty space where Vickers should have been, and the faint yellow smear leading away like a breadcrumb trail. Outside, the bay boots pounded. Radios crackled. Doors slammed. Somewhere farther down the corridor, someone shouted for a gurney. Riley kept her hand steady on Noah's line and forced herself to look only at what was in front of her. In the corner of her vision, the shattered vial glinted under emergency lights, dark liquid still pooling, still waiting to be named. The trauma bay stayed loud long after the gun was gone. Alarms still wailed in the hallway. Not the code blue tone now, but a layered chorus of security alerts and overhead announcements that made the hospital feel less like a place of healing and more like a ship taking fire. Radios crackled in short bursts. Boots pounded. Doors slammed and echoed down sterile corridors. Even the air had changed. Ozone from the electrical arc lingered sharp in Riley's nose, mixed with antiseptic and sweat and the faint metallic bite of gunpowder that did not belong in a hospital. Riley forced her hands back into the language she trusted. Pulse, rhythm, oxygen, breath. Noah's heart rate held in the high 60s. Oxygen saturation climbed in stubborn increments. His breathing still fought against something unseen, but it was no longer the helpless flutter of a body losing. It was the raw effort of a teenager refusing to go quiet. Dana stood close shoulder, nearly touching Riley's eyes, scanning the room like she expected another breach. The syringe in her hand had never made it into anyone's skin. She still held it like a promise. Elaine sat on the edge of the bed rail now, one arm around her son, as if she could anchor him to the world by sheer force. Her hair was still perfect, her suit still sharp, but her face looked stripped down to something real. Tears had dried in lines on her cheeks. Rage remained contained, hot enough to burn through steel. The senior agent who had addressed Riley returned with 2 more agents behind him. He spoke in a low voice, but it carried over the beeping monitors and distant shouting. "We are moving the patient," he said. "Secure room, restricted corridor." Riley did not argue. "He needs continuous monitoring. Vent support, labs, tox results as soon as the lab can run them. You will have what you need," the agent said, and for the first time, there was a human note in his tone, a recognition that Riley had just stood between a child and a bullet with nothing but training and will. "Doctor, you did the right thing." Riley's jaw tightened. Compliments felt slippery. She had learned that praise could be used like a leash. "Fine, Dr. Vickers," she said instead. The agent's eyes flicked toward the doorway. "We are already searching." Riley glanced down at the floor near the threshold. The faint yellow smear still pointed outward like a trail. Agents were photographing it now, marking it with small evidence tents. A woman in gloves crouched near the shattered vial, taking samples with careful motions. Dana leaned close to Riley's ear. "They are treating this like a crime scene." "It is," Riley murmured. Noah stirred again. His eyes opened fully for a few seconds unfocused, then locking onto Riley with effort. "Doctor," he rasped. Riley leaned in. "I am here." Noah swallowed, grimacing. "Lucas." Riley kept her voice calm. "He cannot get to you." Noah's eyes flicked to his mother, then back to Riley. "Not just him." Elaine stiffened. "Noah." Noah's voice weakened, but did not stop. "There were others. They knew where I would be. They knew when I would be alone." Riley felt the words settle into her bones. The breach had been too clean. The timing too precise. Someone had planned around hospital routines, around shift schedules, around who would be in that room. She thought of Lucas saying her name as if he had read it off a brief. "Dr. Shaw, on duty tonight." Riley forced herself to stay present. "Focus on breathing," she told Noah. "In through your nose if you can. Slow." Dana signaled to respiratory staff who had been held back in the hallway. They entered now under agent escort, moving quickly, but careful eyes wide at the evidence markers on the floor. Riley gave orders like she had been doing it for years. "Assist ventilation, prepare transport, keep the line secure, do not let anyone touch the puncture site. Document everything." A resident appeared at the doorway, face-pale eyes darting between Riley and the agents. He looked like a man who had just discovered the world could be rewritten in a single night. "Dr. Shaw," he began. A Secret Service agent stepped in front of him. No entry. The resident swallowed. "She is the doctor." The agent looked at him flatly. "She is still not your clearance." The resident backed away. Dana exhaled through her nose. "Welcome to federal medicine." They moved Noah with the kind of caution usually reserved for explosive ordnance. 2 agents walked ahead scanning. 2 behind. Elaine stayed at the gurney's side, one hand gripping the rail so hard her knuckles turned pale. Riley walked with them, monitoring the ventilator and the IV line's eyes on Noah's chest, on the slow rise and fall that meant he was still here. As they turned into a restricted corridor, Riley caught a glimpse of the main hallway beyond. The hospital had transformed. Security guards stood at doors that were usually propped open. Metal detectors had appeared near the main entrance. Agents stood in clusters, speaking into radios, faces grim. A nurse pushed a cart past a group of men in suits and flinched when one of them turned too fast. Harbor Point Medical Center had always been a place where people arrived broken and left changed. Tonight, it was also a place where truth had arrived, dragging guns and politics behind it. They placed Noah in a private room with reinforced locks. The monitor's beeping softened in the smaller space, less echo, more intimate. The room smelled clean, but Riley could still taste the trauma bay on her tongue. Elaine remained at the bedside. The senior agent spoke to her quietly in the corner. Riley caught only fragments. Secure perimeter. Federal coordination. Media containment. When the agent left, Elaine turned to Riley. Her voice was controlled again, but the control looked different now. It was not performance. It was survival. "You will stay with him," Elaine said. Riley met her gaze. "I have to finish his stabilization. Then another physician will take over." Elaine's eyes narrowed. "No." Riley's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I am a resident. I am not his personal physician." Elaine stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You are the only person in that room who saw the mark and acted." Dana moved into the doorway, arms folded, watching. She did not look surprised to see a first lady trying to command a hospital like it was an office. Riley kept her voice even. "He needs a team." Elaine's expression softened for a fraction, then hardened again. He also needs someone who is not on anyone's payroll. Riley felt the words land. Payroll, contracts, influence. Elaine was not just afraid of an assassin. She was afraid of a system. Riley thought of Vickers, his insistence on protocol like a shield, his relief in the dark, his absence now. "I will stay until he is stable," Riley said. "After that, the hospital will assign coverage." Elaine held Riley's gaze as if measuring her. "You are too young," Elaine said, not as an insult this time, but as a grim observation. "And you still acted." Riley looked at Noah. "Age does not change physiology." Elaine's mouth tightened. "No. It changes what people think they can do to you." Riley did not answer because she could feel that truth already crawling under her skin. Dana cleared her throat. "Doctor, lab is calling." Riley stepped into the hall with Dana. The corridor smelled like disinfectant and nervous sweat. 2 agents stood outside Noah's door, faces blank, weapons concealed but ready. Dana handed Riley a phone. Riley listened, eyes on the tile on the shine of the floor that made every movement visible. A lab tech spoke fast. "We got prelim tox. Opioids confirmed heavy. Also, a neuromuscular blocker signature. It is not a standard sedative panel. We are running extended." Riley's stomach tightened. "Any identification?" "Not yet," the tech said. "But it looks like something used in controlled settings." Riley closed her eyes briefly. Operating rooms, anesthesia carts, restricted medications. That narrowed the list of who could access it. She opened her eyes and found Dana watching her. "It is real," Riley said quietly. Dana nodded once. "I never thought it was not." Riley's throat tightened. "Evan!" Dana's face changed at the name. Not surprise, something heavier, memory. Riley had not said her brother's name out loud in this hallway in a long time. It felt like placing a photograph on a grave. Dana lowered her voice. "We keep him alive, then we talk." Riley handed the phone back, then asked one of the agents outside Noah's room, "I need to speak to whoever is leading this." The agent's eyes flicked to Riley's badge, then to her face. He hesitated as if deciding whether she was a risk or an asset. A different man appeared a moment later, older, calm, with the posture of someone who had stood in more dangerous rooms than this. He introduced himself as Special Agent Martin Reyes, Secret Service. Dr. Shaw Reyes said, "We need a statement." Riley's mouth went dry. "I just gave you a patient, not a confession." Reyes' expression did not change. "This will be formal." Dana's hand touched Riley's arm briefly. Grounding, solid. Riley nodded once. "Fine." They moved her into a consultation room that smelled like old carpet cleaner. A recorder was placed on the table. 2 agents sat across from her. One typed. The other watched her face like it was a document that could betray itself. "What time did the patient arrive?" the typist asked. 2:47, Riley said. "Who was present?" Riley named staff. Dana, 2 residents, respiratory. "What did you observe?" Riley described the puncture mark, the necrosis, the pinpoint pupils, the residue. The agent watching her leaned forward slightly. "Why did you suspect poisoning?" Riley's jaw tightened. "Because he did not present like a standard overdose. Because his respiratory shutdown did not match the initial rhythm. Because the puncture mark was not consistent with the hospital intervention." The typist glanced up. "And you made that assessment as a resident?" Riley met his eyes. "I made it as a doctor who can see." The agent watching her voice stayed calm. "You challenged Dr. Grant Vickers in the trauma bay." Riley felt heat in her chest. "Dr. Vickers challenged me every day." Tonight, a boy was dying. Dr. Vickers stated that the patient was the president's son before the identity was announced. The typist said, reading from notes. Riley's pulse thudded. "Yes. How did that strike you?" "It was wrong," Riley said. "It meant he knew something he should not." The agent watching her leaned back. "Doctor, I'm going to ask this plainly. Do you believe Dr. Vickers was involved?" Riley held his gaze. The room was silent except for the hum of the recorder. I believe he tried to prevent a toxicology screen, Riley said. I believe he had a vial of unknown substance that broke during the blackout. I believe he looked relieved when the lights went out. Those are facts. You can draw your own conclusions. The typist's fingers moved faster. The agent watching her nodded once. Where is Dr. Vickers now? Riley's mouth tightened. That is your job. She gave her statement again and again. To a hospital attorney who looked terrified. To a federal investigator with tired eyes. To a man from a different agency who did not introduce himself and asked questions like he was building a map in his head. Hours bled into each other. Dawn crept through the hospital windows in pale streaks. Riley's scrubs stiffened with dried sweat. Her hands trembled when she tried to drink water. At some point, she realized she had been awake for more than 30 hours. The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty when she finally stumbled into it. The smell of stale coffee made her stomach turn. She sat at a table and stared at a paper cup like it had instructions printed on it she could not read. Dana slid into the seat across from her. She had changed gloves, washed hands, but the fatigue in her eyes was deep. "They are calling you a hero," Dana said quietly. Riley's throat tightened. "They do not know what they are saying." Dana leaned back slightly. "They know you stood up. That is enough for headlines." Riley stared at the coffee. Her hands shook when she tried to lift it. She set it down. "I keep thinking," Riley said, voice low. "If I had known what I know now, Evan would be alive." Dana's eyes softened. "You cannot do that." Riley's jaw clenched. "I already did." Dana was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward. "Tell me about the mark." Riley swallowed. "Same place, same angle, same residue. He was found unconscious. They called it an overdose. Protocol. No questions." Dana's gaze dropped to the table. "I remember." Riley's breath caught. "You were there." Dana nodded once. "I was on shift. I watched you in that hallway, hands on the glass like you could pull him back through it." Riley's throat tightened until it hurt. "Why did nobody listen?" Dana's jaw flexed. "Because a story that comforts people is easier than a truth that breaks systems." Riley stared at Dana, anger rising. "And you let them bury it." Dana's eyes snapped up sharp. "Do not put that on me." Riley's hands clenched. "Then what do I put it on?" Dana's voice stayed controlled. "Put it on whoever did it. Put it on whoever benefited. Put it on whoever had access." Riley swallowed hard. Her chest ached. "I need his file." Dana's expression changed. Reluctance. Warning. Not fear of paperwork. Fear of what the file might contain. Riley, Dana said softly. "Sometimes the past should stay buried." Riley leaned forward, voice low and hard. "Not if it was murder." Dana held her gaze. The cafeteria lights made the lines at the corners of her eyes look deeper. She looked like someone who had carried too many bodies to the morgue and learned what questions could do to a person's life. Before Dana could answer, a woman approached the table. She wore a dark suit and carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who did not need to raise her voice to be obeyed. Her badge flashed as she moved. "Dr. Riley Shaw," she said. Riley stood automatically, chair scraping. "Yes." The woman held out a hand. "Special Agent Jordan Pierce, Federal Bureau of Investigation." Dana's posture tightened. She did not stand, but her eyes sharpened. Pierce shook Riley's hand, once firm, then sat without asking permission. "We need to talk about your brother." Riley's pulse hammered. "Evan." Pierce nodded. "Evan Shaw." Riley's throat went dry. "You know his name." Pierce's face did not soften. "We know a lot of names." Riley lowered herself back into the chair legs, unsteady. "What is this?" Pierce placed a thin folder on the table. The paper looked ordinary. The weight of it did not. 3 years ago, Pierce said Evan Shaw discovered evidence of fraud tied to medical equipment procurement. Riley stared at her. "What?" Pierce continued, voice calm, methodical. "Defense-linked contracts. Hospital supply chains. Pharmaceutical distribution. Equipment marked up. Billing manipulated. Kickbacks laundered through shell entities. Riley's mind tried to reject it, because it sounded too big, too organized, too political to be about her brother who loved bad jokes and never remembered to charge his phone. He was a resident, Riley said. He did not have access to that. Pierce's gaze stayed on her. He had access to a patient. He saw irregularities. He asked questions. He pulled records he should not have pulled. Dana's mouth tightened. He did ask questions. Riley looked at Dana. You knew. Dana's voice was quiet. He was careful. He did not tell many people. Riley's chest tightened. Why would he do that? Pierce's tone did not change. Because he believed it mattered. Riley swallowed, and someone killed him for it. Pierce nodded once. Yes. Riley's hands went cold. Who? Pierce opened the folder and slid a photograph across the table. Riley's breath stopped. Dr. Grant Vickers. The photo was recent, taken from a distance. Vickers' face was turned slightly. Eyes narrowed, the same expression he wore when he corrected a resident in public. The same expression he wore when he decided you were beneath him. Riley's mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. Dana whispered no. Riley's voice finally surfaced rough. He did not. Pierce's gaze stayed steady. He did. Riley's hands trembled. What? Pierce answered like she had said it 100 times. Because Vickers has been eliminating threats to the fraud network for years. Your brother was one of at least 7. Riley's vision blurred. She blinked hard, trying to keep the room from spinning. Dana's voice came out tight. Evan was not an addict. Pierce nodded. He was not. The overdose narrative was convenient. The same convenience used tonight. Riley pressed her fingers to her temple as if she could hold her skull together. Why did you not stop him? Pierce's eyes did not flinch. We were building a case. We needed evidence that would survive court. We needed a break in the pattern. Riley's jaw clenched. My brother was your break. Pierce's voice stayed calm. Your brother was a victim. Tonight you created an opportunity. Riley's anger surged. I saved a boy. Pierce held her gaze. You did more than that. You exposed an attempt to turn murder into an accident. You forced the system to look at what it prefers to ignore. Riley wanted to stand up to leave to run until the hospital disappeared behind her. Her body remained seated as if pinned. Dana's hand came to rest on Riley's wrist, steadying the tremor. Pierce leaned in slightly. Dr. Shaw, I am going to be direct. We want you to testify. Riley stared at her. Testify against Vickers. Yes. Riley's mouth went dry. He will kill me. Pierce did not soften the truth. They will try. Dana's eyes sharpened. Who is they? Pierce's gaze flicked to Dana, then back to Riley. People who profit from silence. People who use institutions as cover. Riley's throat tightened. What about Noah? What about the vice president? Pierce nodded once. The vice president is in custody. Riley blinked. Already? Pierce's expression remained controlled. A pre-dawn operation. Coordinated. Evidence was already in motion. Noah's records accelerated the timeline. Riley's chest felt too tight to breathe. She pictured headlines. Helicopters, cameras. A nation waking up to a scandal while she sat in a cafeteria smelling old coffee and learning her brother had been murdered. Dana exhaled slowly. Vickers. Pierce's gaze stayed steady. Dr. Vickers was detained for questioning. Riley's heart thudded. Detained. Pierce nodded. We found him on hospital property. Riley's mind flashed to the yellow smear, the trail that led away. He had moved. He had tried to disappear into the hospital, the place he controlled, the place that had protected him with reputation and routine. Pierce continued. He is not confessing. He is not cooperating. He has counsel. Riley swallowed. Then, why do you need me? Pierce's voice stayed even. Because you were there tonight. You saw the sequence. You documented the deviation from protocol. You can speak to the vial. You can speak to his behavior. You can tie his pattern to your brother's case. Riley looked down at the photograph of Vickers. The lines of his face looked familiar in a way that made her stomach turn. She had spent months trying to earn a nod from that man, a scrap of respect. She had tried to convince herself that if she worked harder, if she learned faster, if she swallowed the humiliations, she would become the kind of doctor the hospital valued. He had been measuring her not to teach her, but to decide whether she was a threat. Riley's voice came out low. If I testify, I become a target. Pierce nodded once. Yes. Dana's voice tightened. She is already a target. Pierce's eyes flicked to Dana. We will provide protection. Riley let out a short, humorless breath. Protection. That word does not mean much tonight. Pierce did not argue. It will mean something with us. Riley's hands trembled. She thought of Evan again, lying on a bed under Light's puncture mark on his neck story written over his body like a blanket. She thought of Noah struggling to breathe, telling them he had uploaded evidence because he knew a second attempt would come. Riley lifted her eyes to Pierce. I want to see Evan's file. Pierce held her gaze. You will. Dana looked away, jaw tight, as if she had been holding her own guilt in her teeth for years. Pierce stood. You will be contacted today. Do not leave the hospital without notifying us. Riley swallowed. This is insane. Pierce's expression did not change. This is organized. When Pierce left, Riley sat very still. The cafeteria noise felt distant, muffled, like she was underwater. Dana spoke first. You do not have to decide right now. Riley's voice came out flat. Yes, I do. Dana shook her head slightly. You need sleep. Riley stared at the coffee again. If I sleep, I will dream of Evan, and Vickers and Noah. Dana exhaled slowly. Then we keep you moving. Within hours, protection arrived. Not the flashy kind, not a parade of weapons. The quiet kind that changed the air around Riley wherever she went. 2 agents in plain clothes stood near the nurse's station whenever Riley walked by. A third appeared in the hallway outside her call room. Someone checked her badge twice at a door that had never required more than a glance. Riley felt the hospital shift around her. Conversations paused when she entered. People looked away too fast. She could not tell who was afraid for her and who was afraid of what she might say. She checked on Noah again in the secure room. His color looked better. His eyes were clearer. He was still weak, still tethered to machines, but he was present. Elaine stood at the window, phone in hand, listening to someone on the other end with a face like stone. When she turned, she looked older. Noah wants to speak to you, Elaine said. Riley stepped closer to the bed. Noah's eyes followed her. You are the one who saw it, Noah whispered. Riley nodded. The mark. Noah swallowed. I thought I was going crazy. When I felt the pinch, I tried to turn, but my muscles stopped working. It was like being locked inside my body. Riley's chest tightened. Do you remember where you were? Noah's eyes shifted upward, searching. A hallway, after an event. People everywhere. Then I stepped into a side corridor. Someone said my name. Riley kept her voice gentle. A man, a woman. Noah's gaze flicked to Elaine, then back. A man, suit, friendly voice. Elaine's jaw tightened. They knew his route. Riley nodded slightly. They had a plan. Noah's eyes sharpened with effort. I did not upload just because I was scared. I uploaded because I knew they would try to make it disappear. Riley looked at him, at this 16-year-old boy who had been forced into a world where survival required strategy. You did the right thing. Noah's mouth tightened. So did your brother. Riley froze. What? Noah's voice was weak but sure. Mom told me. There was a doctor here, a resident. He asked questions. He tried to report something, then he died. Riley's throat tightened. Evan. Noah nodded slowly. He tried to do the right thing. He got punished for it. Riley's eyes burned. She blinked hard. I spent years thinking he destroyed himself. Elaine's voice came quiet from behind Riley. I did not know the details. I only knew there were whispers. Evan's name came up in briefings after it happened. Riley turned slightly. Briefings. Elaine did not flinch. The world your son lives in is made of briefings. Riley swallowed the anger because anger would not change anything in this room. Then listen to this. I am not letting his name be a footnote. Elaine watched her, and for a moment Riley saw something like respect again, edged with calculation. Noah is stable, Riley said, turning back to him. You rest, you let your body recover. Your job is to heal. The rest is for adults with badges and lawyers. Noah's mouth twitched faintly. Adults with badges tried to kill me. Riley's jaw tightened, some did. As Riley left the secure room, one of the agents outside fell into step beside her. Dr. Shaw, we need you to come with us. Riley's stomach dropped. For what? Update, the agent said. They brought her to a conference room with a single table and too many chairs. Pierce was there again, along with a man in a suit who looked like he lived in courtrooms. Pierce spoke without preamble. Dr. Vickers has been charged. Riley's breath caught. Charged with what? Attempted murder, Pierce said. Conspiracy. Evidence tampering. Federal corruption-related charges pending. Riley's hands clenched, and Evan, Pierce's eyes held hers. Evan's case is being reopened formally. Riley let out a slow breath she did not realize she was holding. Good. Pierce slid a paper across the table. Protective measures begin immediately. Riley looked down. This is a schedule. Your movements, Pierce said. Your routes, your contacts, your devices. Riley's jaw tightened. You're turning my life into a map. Pierce nodded. Because someone else already did. Riley swallowed. Vickers. Pierce held her gaze, and others. Riley's mouth went dry. What do you want from me? Pierce's voice stayed steady. A statement for federal court. A commitment to testify. Riley stared at the paper until the words blurred. She thought of Evan again. His smile, his stubbornness. The way he used to say that doing the right thing did not guarantee a reward. It only guaranteed you could live with yourself. Riley lifted her eyes. I will testify. The man in the suit spoke for the first time. Doctor, you need to understand the implications. Riley's voice stayed calm. I understand them. Pierce nodded once as if she had expected nothing less. Then you do not travel alone. You do not post. You do not speak to media. You do not deviate from routes without notifying us. Riley swallowed. This is my hospital. Pierce's expression stayed flat. Not today. Riley left the conference room with a strange quiet in her chest. It was not peace. It was the numb focus that came after shock. The kind that let soldiers move through smoke because stopping meant dying. Dana was waiting outside, arms folded, face tight. They pulled you in again. Riley nodded. Vickers has been charged. Dana's eyes widened slightly. Charged does not mean convicted. Riley's mouth tightened. No. Dana leaned closer. Riley, listen to me. Men like him do not stop because paperwork exists. Riley's eyes met hers. I know. Dana exhaled slowly. They told me you are not leaving the hospital without escort. Riley nodded. I have a shadow now. Dana's gaze softened. You have a team. Riley almost laughed at that word. Team. She had spent 6 months feeling alone under Vickers' thumb. Tonight had changed something, but it did not erase what the hospital could do when it wanted to protect its own. She went back to work because that was what she did. She checked on patients who had nothing to do with presidents or politics. A fisherman with a crushed hand. A toddler with a fever. A sailor with a fractured jaw. The ordinary pain of the world did not pause for corruption, but everywhere Riley walked she felt eyes on her. Some curious, some frightened, some resentful. Late afternoon, as the sky outside turned the color of bruised steel, Riley stepped into an empty supply corridor to breathe for a second. The hospital lights flickered once, just a harmless flicker, but her heart jumped anyway. She leaned her head against the cool wall and closed her eyes. Evan, Noah, the puncture mark, the broken vial, Vickers' relief, the sound of glass shattering in the dark. She opened her eyes and found Dana standing at the end of the corridor, moving toward her with urgency in her stride. Dana stopped a few feet away, voice low and tight. Riley. Riley straightened. What? Dana swallowed once. Vickers posted bail. Riley's stomach dropped. How? Dana's eyes flashed. Money? Lawyers? Connections. It happened fast. Riley's mouth went dry. Where is he? Dana shook her head. Gone. He disappeared after release. Riley's pulse hammered. Pierce nose. Dana nodded. They are moving. Riley felt cold spread through her arms. Vickers knew the hospital. He knew routines. He knew doors that did not show up on maps. He knew where cameras did not point. He had spent months watching her work, watching her patterns, deciding whether she was a threat. Dana's voice tightened further. They think he is coming here. Riley's throat tightened. To do what? Dana's eyes held hers. She did not need to say it. A distant alarm started somewhere in the building. Not the flat scream of a code blue, but the rising tone of a warning that spread through hallways like a wave. Riley turned her head slightly, listening. Another alarm joined it, then another. The air shifted. A faint smell, barely there at first, edged into the corridor. Smoke. Riley's spine went rigid. Dana's voice came low, urgent. Move. Move was not a suggestion. Dana's hand clamped around Riley's forearm and pulled her into motion before Riley's mind could catch up. The corridor outside the secure room had changed in the last few minutes. People ran with purpose now, not the controlled urgency of a trauma team, but the frantic flow of a building realizing it might be trapped. Overhead speakers cracked and repeated the same command in a voice that tried to sound calm and failed. Code red. West Wing evacuation. Repeat. Code red, West Wing evacuation. The smell of smoke thickened with every breath. It crept along the ceiling tiles, slid under door frames, and settled into the back of Riley's throat like a warning. Riley turned her head toward the secure room. Noah was still inside monitors, chirping ventilator, hissing softly. 2 agents stood at the door, faces blank, eyes alert. Dana's voice stayed low. We get him out. Riley's heart hammered. He cannot be moved without support. He can be moved if the building burns. Dana shot back. The hallway lights flickered once, then steadied. The hospital's backup power hummed beneath the floor like a distant engine. Somewhere down the corridor, a fire door slammed shut with a metallic boom. Riley pushed past Dana and stepped into Noah's room. Elaine turned from the window phone, still in her hand, as if the device had become an extension of her anger. What is happening? Fire Dana said. West Wing. Elaine's eyes flicked to the ceiling vents. A thin haze had begun to drift in, barely visible in the light. Is this an accident? Riley heard the question underneath the words. The question that did not want to be spoken out loud. Is this him? Riley moved to Noah's bedside, hands already checking lines, securing tubing, tightening straps. We need transport oxygen. We need to keep him ventilated. We need the crash cart with us. One of the agents stepped closer. We are moving now. Riley's jaw clenched. Then you are moving with my equipment. Noah's eyes opened. He looked exhausted, drained, but his gaze was clear enough to find Riley. His lips moved. Doctor, he rasped. I am here, Riley said, leaning close so he would not have to spend breath on volume. You are going to feel movement. Focus on slow breaths. Do not fight the ventilator. Noah swallowed, grimaced. Vickers. Riley's chest tightened. Do not talk. Noah's fingers curled weakly around the sheet. He is coming. Riley's eyes flicked to the doorway. Smoke thickened in the hall outside, a pale gray ribbon turning heavier by the second. Dana was already positioning the gurney, snapping locks into place, checking straps with the speed of someone who had loaded wounded under fire. Elaine stepped closer to Noah, gripping his hand. Noah, look at me. Noah's gaze shifted to her, and Riley saw the fear behind it. Not fear of death. Fear of what death would allow other people to do. Elaine's voice dropped. You stay alive. Noah's eyes closed briefly, as if it cost him effort to hold the world in focus. Then he nodded. Agents formed a tight shield around the gurney as they rolled Noah into the corridor. Riley walked at the ventilator side, hands on the tubing, eyes on Noah's chest rise. Dana pushed from the foot, steering through bodies and carts and staff shouting over the alarms. The hospital had become a maze of motion. Nurses guided patients on portable monitors. Respiratory therapists hauled oxygen tanks. Security shouted directions at staff who did not have clearance to question. Fire doors closed in segments, funneling everyone into narrower corridors. Riley's brain ran emergency protocols without asking permission. Fire compartments, evacuation routes, stairwell priorities. The kind of information she had memorized out of stubbornness, the kind of thing Vickers had once mocked her for. She caught a glimpse through a window as they turned a corner. Smoke rose from the far side of the building, thick and dark. Something was burning hard, feeding on oxygen and complacency. Riley kept walking. Noah's monitor beeped steadily. Each beep was a small victory that could still be taken away. An agent pressed a hand to his earpiece. Perimeter compromised. West Wing stairwell is blocked. Use central elevators. Move. Dana's mouth tightened. Elevators in a fire. The agent did not look at her. We do what we can with what we have. Riley's eyes flicked to the ceiling. The sprinklers had not triggered in this corridor yet. The smoke here was thinner. They were still ahead of the worst of it. Central elevators, Riley said. We keep his airway stable. No sharp turns. Watch the ventilator battery. Dana nodded once. Got it. They reached the elevator bank and found it crowded with staff and patients. A security guard tried to hold the line. One at a time. Critical only. An agent flashed credentials. The line parted without argument. Riley watched the doors open. The interior lights were harsh bright, too normal for a building that smelled like smoke. Dana rolled the gurney in with care. Riley followed, keeping the ventilator close. Elaine stepped in last, still holding Noah's hand, her grip fierce. The doors began to close. Riley saw movement at the far end of the hallway before the gap narrowed. A white coat, a silhouette, a man walking against the flow, calm in chaos. Riley's spine went rigid. Dr. Grant Vickers emerged through the smoke like he belonged there. His hair was slightly disheveled. His face looked hollowed out, but his eyes were sharp, fixed. In his hand was a syringe that caught the emergency lighting and threw it back in a cold glint. Not a gun. Something worse because it belonged here. It could be explained away if you wanted to lie. Vickers raised the syringe slightly as if greeting her. Riley's heart hammered so hard she could hear it over the alarm. The elevator doors slid shut. Elaine's voice came tight. Who was that? Riley kept her eyes on the metal seam that had just sealed them away from the corridor. Dr. Vickers. Dana's jaw flexed. He found you. Noah's eyelids fluttered. His voice was barely a thread. He will not stop. The elevator jolted, then moved. Riley forced herself to look down at Noah to check his oxygen saturation, to focus on what she could control. But her mind stayed on the image of Vickers moving toward them through smoke with a syringe in his hand, like it was the most natural tool in the world. They reached a lower floor and spilled out into another corridor. The air was clearer here, but the alarm still echoed through the structure, bouncing off walls, vibrating in the bones. Agents guided them toward a secured exit route. Riley saw a cluster of firefighters coming up a stairwell, faces smeared with soot helmets, catching the light. One of them shouted to another, "West Wing is feeding fast. We need more hose on the third." Dana leaned close to Riley. He started it. Riley did not answer because the truth felt obvious and also impossible. Why burn the hospital? Why turn a building full of sick people into a weapon? Then Riley understood. Because fire created chaos. Chaos broke routines. Chaos opened doors. Chaos gave him cover. They pushed Noah into an ambulance bay that had been turned into a staging area. Portable lights glared. Staff moved patients into vehicles or into safer internal zones. Radios crackled in overlapping layers. The whole space felt like an improvised command post. An agent approached Elaine. "Ma'am, you and the patient will be moved off-site." Elaine's eyes narrowed. "And Dr. Shaw?" The agent hesitated. "Dr. Shaw has her own protection detail." Elaine stepped closer, voice low and sharp. "The last protection detail tried to kill my son." The agent's jaw tightened. He glanced toward Riley, then back to Elaine. "Understood." Dana touched Riley's arm. "You go with them." Riley shook her head. "No. If he comes back, he comes for me. If I leave, he might cut through everyone else to get to Noah." Dana's eyes flashed. "He is already cutting through everyone else." Riley's throat tightened. She looked at Noah. He was still alive. Still breathing with help. Still here. Elaine held Noah's hand and stared at Riley as if trying to read the end of this story from her face. Riley leaned close to Noah. "You listen to me. You stay alive. You keep breathing. Do not waste energy talking." Noah blinked slowly. "You cannot stay." Riley's mouth tightened. "I am not leaving you." Noah's eyes narrowed with effort. "He wants you, not me." Riley felt the truth of that strike her chest. Her testimony, her voice, her eyes on the mark. She was the keystone Pierce had named. Elaine's voice came tight. "Dr. Shaw." Riley straightened. "Get him out, now." Dana pushed the gurney forward. Agents moved with them, forming a moving wall. Elaine stayed at Noah's side, never letting go. Riley walked with them until the last checkpoint. Then a different agent stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "That is as far as you go," he said. Riley looked past him and saw Noah being loaded into a vehicle with equipment and guards. Dana turned back once, face hard. "Do not be a hero alone." Riley almost laughed. The night had already stripped that word of glamour. She turned away from the convoy and stepped back into the hospital. The air inside was worse now. Smoke had settled into the hallways like a living thing. The emergency lights pulsed red in long corridors, making every surface look wounded. Riley moved fast, not running, conserving breath. Her shoes squeaked on tile that had begun to sweat condensation from sprinklers triggered in other zones. She heard footsteps behind her and spun. It was not Vickers. It was Special Agent Jordan Pierce, moving quickly, hair pulled back, weapon in hand, like she knew exactly what she was walking into. Pierce's eyes locked on Riley. "Where is he?" Riley's voice came out tight. "He was on the third-floor corridor near the central elevators." "He has a syringe." Pierce's jaw tightened. "He is inside." Riley swallowed. "He knows this building." Pierce's gaze flicked up and down, Riley assessing. "Are you armed?" Riley's mouth tightened. "I am a doctor." Pierce stepped closer. "Then stay behind me." Riley's anger flared. "I am not a liability." Pierce's voice stayed flat. "You are the target." Riley heard a distant metallic clang. A fire door slamming. Footsteps. The building shifting as it tried to contain the blaze. Pierce raised a hand, quiet. They moved together down the corridor, Pierce leading, weapon low, but ready. Riley stayed close eyes scanning corners like she had learned over the last few days from agents who treated hallways as threats. Smoke thickened. The air tasted like plastic and burned insulation now. Riley's lungs tightened with each breath. A figure emerged at the far end of the corridor, backlit by a faint orange glow from flames somewhere behind him. Vickers. He stood still as if he had been waiting for them. His white coat was smeared with soot. His face looked drawn, almost sick, but his eyes were clear. Too clear. The syringe glinted in his hand. Pierce aimed her weapon. "Drop it." Vickers smiled slightly. "Federal agents in my hospital." Riley's stomach turned at the familiarity in his tone, the way he spoke like he was still teaching. Pierce's voice stayed cold. "Drop the syringe." Vickers did not look at Pierce. He looked at Riley. "Dr. Shaw," he said calmly, "you have been very disruptive." Riley's throat tightened. "You killed my brother." Vickers' expression barely moved. "Your brother was naive." Riley's hands clenched into fists. He tried to report fraud. Vickers shrugged, as if discussing a case study. He tried to interfere with the system that keeps hospitals funded and careers intact. Pierce stepped forward. "Last warning." Vickers lifted the syringe a little higher like he was showing it off. "This is not about Noah anymore. That boy lived. You forced a deviation." Riley's pulse hammered. The corridor felt narrow. Smoke turned everything into a tunnel. Pierce spoke again sharper. "Drop it now." Vickers' gaze never left Riley. "Do you know why I posted bail?" he asked, voice calm. Riley did not answer. Vickers' smile turned bitter. "Because I am already dead. The people who hired me do not tolerate failure." Riley's chest tightened. "So you burn the hospital?" Vickers tilted his head. "The hospital will recover. Buildings always do. People do not." Pierce took another step. "Enough." Vickers moved, not toward Pierce, toward Riley, fast. The syringe drove forward like a weapon aimed at a soft place in Riley's neck. Riley's body reacted before her fear could lock it. She dropped low and twisted sideways, moving like Pierce had drilled into her in a parking garage under a streetlight over and over until the motion became instinct. The syringe missed by inches. Riley's hand flashed to the crash cart parked against the wall nearby, abandoned in evacuation. The top drawer was open. Inside, a sealed scalpel pack. Riley ripped it open with shaking fingers and palmed the scalpel. Vickers turned quicker than she expected for a man in his 50s. His eyes narrowed, surprised, then delighted in a sick way. "You learned," he said. Pierce lunged, trying to get between them, weapon trained, but the smoke and tight corridor made angles dangerous. Riley heard Pierce shout, "Riley, get back." Riley did not step back. Vickers came again, syringe leading. Riley pivoted, brought her scalpel hand up, and slashed across Vickers' wrist. The cut was shallow but enough. Vickers screamed a raw sound that tore through the corridor. The syringe slipped from his fingers and clattered on the tile, skidding, spinning, then stopping near the wall. Riley kicked it away hard, sending it under a fire extinguisher cabinet. Vickers clutched his wrist, blood dark against soot eyes, wide with shock. "You," he breathed. Riley's voice came out steady, despite the shaking in her arms. "I am not Evan." Pierce surged forward and slammed Vickers against the wall, wrenching his arm behind him. On the ground, Vickers coughed, half laughing, half choking. "It does not matter." Riley stood a few feet away, scalpel still in her hand, smoke curling around her like fog. She could feel her heart trying to claw out of her ribs. Pierce snapped cuffs onto Vickers' wrists with practiced speed. "You are done." Vickers lifted his head and looked at Riley one last time. His eyes were cold, calculating and strangely calm now that the immediate violence had failed. "You think you won," he whispered. Riley's jaw tightened. "I think you are going to prison." Vickers' smile was thin. "Prison is paperwork. The machine is patience." Pierce hauled him upright. Firefighters' voices echoed closer now, shouting orders, boots pounding through the smoke. Vickers' gaze stayed on Riley as agents appeared at the far end of the corridor. "You cannot arrest a machine," he said softly. "You just made yourself visible to it." Pierce shoved him forward. "Move." Vickers stumbled, then caught himself. As he was dragged away, his white coat trailing, he turned his head one last time, eyes narrowing like he was carving her face into memory. Riley stood still until he disappeared into the haze of agents and flashlights. Pierce stepped back toward Riley, eyes scanning her for injuries. "Are you hit?" Riley swallowed. "No." Pierce's gaze flicked to the scalpel in Riley's hand. "Drop it." Riley looked down as if noticing it for the first time. Her fingers loosened. The scalpel fell to the tile with a small, clean sound. The corridor shook faintly as sprinklers activated somewhere nearby. Water hissed, smoke swirled. The building fought for breath. Pierce touched Riley's shoulder briefly. "We are leaving." Riley's lungs burned. "Noah!" "He is out," Pierce said. "He is moving." Riley let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in her body for hours. Firefighters appeared, faces hidden behind masks, carrying hoses and axes, eyes scanning the corridor as if it were a combat zone. One of them pointed at Riley. "This area is unsafe. Move now." Pierce guided Riley away down a stairwell that smelled like wet concrete and smoke. Each step felt like it took everything she had left. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. It hit Riley's lungs like a shock. She coughed hard, bending over, hands on her knees. Water from sprinklers soaked her hair and scrubs. Sirens screamed. Fire trucks lined the street. Floodlights turned the hospital facade into a harsh stage. Riley straightened slowly and looked up at Harbor Point Medical Center. Smoke still poured from the west wing like a black flag. Dana appeared through the crowd face, streaked with soot eyes wide. She grabbed Riley and pulled her into a fierce hug that made Riley's knees wobble. "You are alive," Dana said, voice rough. Riley nodded once, unable to speak. Dana pulled back, holding Riley's shoulders, eyes searching her face. "He did not get you." Riley's throat tightened. He tried. Dana's jaw clenched. They always do. Pierce approached, expression controlled, but her eyes held a hard relief. "He is in custody." Riley blinked again. Pierce nodded, this time with enough witnesses to make it stick. Riley stared at the hospital, then at the flashing lights, then at the crowd of uniforms and suits. She felt hollowed out, as if every part of her that could shake had already shaken itself empty. Dana's voice came quieter. "You did not freeze." Riley's breath came uneven. "I almost did." Dana shook her head. "Almost does not count." Riley looked down at her hands. They were still trembling. Her scrubs were wet. Her skin smelled like smoke. She thought of Evan, of Noah, of Vickers' syringe glinting in red light. Pierce stepped closer. "We are moving you to a secure location." Riley's jaw tightened. "I'm not leaving my residency." Pierce's voice stayed flat. "You are leaving tonight." Riley wanted to argue, but her body felt like it might collapse if she did. She nodded once, not agreement, just acknowledgement that the night had taken the choice out of her hands. As Pierce guided her toward a waiting vehicle, Riley glanced back one last time. Firefighters worked the blaze. Water cascaded off the building. The hospital stood wounded but standing. Riley's stomach tightened with a strange, sharp resolve. Vickers was in cuffs, but his words still hung in her ears like smoke. "The machine is patience." Riley turned away and got into the car. The car doors shut with a sound that felt too final for a night that still rang in Riley's ears. The interior smelled like clean leather and stale coffee, a government version of comfort. Outside the window, Harbor Point burned under floodlights while firefighters moved like ghosts through steam and smoke. Riley watched water pour down the facade until the building blurred behind glass. Agent Pierce sat across from her phone in hand eyes, scanning messages that never stopped coming. The driver did not speak. The other agent in the front seat kept his gaze forward, like the road itself was a threat. Riley's hands were in her lap, still trembling. The tremor was smaller now, no longer the shaking of panic, more like the aftershock of a blast. She looked down and saw soot under her fingernails, a thin cut on her knuckle, proof that the night had been real. Pierce broke the silence. "We are taking you to a secure location." Riley swallowed. "Noah." "He is off-site," Pierce said. "Protected, medically stable." Riley stared at the headrest in front of her. "Elaine." "With him," Pierce said. She did not leave his side. Riley nodded once. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt a hollow space where adrenaline had been, as if the body did not know what to do when the immediate danger stepped back. Pierce's gaze stayed on her. "You did not get hurt." Riley let out a short breath. "It does not feel like that." Pierce's voice softened by a fraction. "That feeling is normal." Riley looked up. Normal is a word doctors use when they do not have better ones. Pierce almost smiled and then decided not to. She glanced down at her phone again. "Vickers is in custody, federal hold, no bail this time." Riley's throat tightened. "He posted bail earlier." Pierce nodded. "That is not happening again." Riley stared out the window. The streets blurred past wet from hoses and night air. Norfolk looked unchanged, people asleep in houses while the hospital fought fire and truth at the same time. "You called it a machine," Riley said, remembering Vickers' words in the corridor. Pierce did not pretend not to understand. "It is a network. Money, contracts, pressure. People who do favors for each other." Riley's jaw clenched. "People who kill." Pierce held her gaze. "People who arrange deaths so they do not look like killings." Riley's stomach turned. "Like Evan." Pierce nodded once. "Like Evan." The secure location was a plain hotel that did not look like a place you would fear. Beige, carpet-quiet hallway, a room that smelled like detergent. 2 agents stood outside the door. One inside checked the window locks. A third stood by the TV that was turned off. Riley sat on the edge of the bed in scrubs that smelled like smoke. Pierce stood near the desk laying out paperwork and a thin folder. "This is the formal agreement," Pierce said. "Protection, communication protocols, court procedure." Riley stared at the folder like it might bite her. "I have patience." Pierce's eyes did not soften. "You have a life. We are keeping it intact." Riley's throat tightened. "My life is residency." Pierce nodded. "Your residency is not more important than your pulse." Riley looked down at her hands. They had stopped shaking for a moment. She flexed her fingers slowly the way she did after a long code trying to convince her body she was back in control. "What about Dana?" Riley asked. "Dana Brooks is fine," Pierce said. "She is being interviewed. She will be a witness." Riley's chest tightened. "They will come for her too." Pierce shook her head once. "We have eyes on her." Riley's eyes narrowed. "You did not have eyes on Lucas." Pierce's jaw tightened. "Lucas was not ours. That changed tonight." Riley did not answer. She lay back on the bed without taking off her shoes because her body did not trust stillness. The hotel ceiling was too clean. The quiet was too loud. When she closed her eyes, she saw red emergency lights. She heard glass shattering. She felt the weight of defibrillator paddles in her hands like a weapon that should never have been a weapon. She slept anyway, not gently, but like a person falling off a cliff. When she woke, the sun was up. Her phone buzzed with restricted numbers she could not call back. Pierce sat at the desk already dressed, already awake, like she did not sleep so much as power down. Riley sat up, throat dry. "What time is it?" "Late morning," Pierce said. Riley's stomach tightened. "Noah." Pierce slid her a bottle of water. Stable, awake, under guard. Riley drank the water, cold and sharp. "Elaine." "Still with him," Pierce said. "And she is speaking to federal prosecutors." Riley swallowed. "About Halden." Pierce nodded. "Vice President Malcolm Halden is in custody." Riley blinked. "Already?" Pierce's eyes stayed steady. Noah's uploads made the timeline simple. Halden was already under scrutiny. The evidence turned scrutiny into handcuffs. Riley set the water down slowly. It felt unreal that a man at that level could be taken down like that. Then again, she had watched a Secret Service agent point a gun at a child in a trauma bay. Unreal had become routine. Pierce opened the thin folder. "We need your statement finalized today." Riley stared at the paper. "How many times do I have to say it?" "Until no one can twist it," Pierce said. "Until your words hold up under cross-examination. Until a defense attorney cannot turn a puncture mark into a misunderstanding." Riley's jaw clenched. He is a surgeon. He knows better. Pierce's gaze was flat. He knows exactly what he did. Riley wrote and spoke and rewrote until her voice went hoarse. Pierce asked questions that felt like scalpels slicing away ambiguity. Riley answered with facts, with timestamps, with sensory details that could be verified. The blackout lasted seconds. The vial shattered in darkness. The liquid was too thick. The residue was yellow. Vickers knew the identity too early. Vickers blocked toxicology. Vickers tried to leave when the room locked down. Lucas called Riley by name. Lucas knew she was on duty. The fire began in the West Wing. Vickers appeared through smoke with a syringe. Riley disarmed him. It went into official record not as drama, but as a chain of events that would either hang a man or set him free. Weeks passed in a strange half-life. Riley returned to the hospital under escort. She walked through metal detectors that had not existed before. She showed her badge to people who already knew her name. She worked shifts with Ecos, agents stationed at a distance pretending to be janitors, orderlies, visitors, anything that did not draw attention. She treated patients who did not know she had fought an assassin with a defibrillator. She intubated a drunk sailor. She stitched up a teenager who had crashed a bike. She managed a sepsis case in a woman who reminded her of her mother. Medicine did not care who was watching. It demanded competence. It demanded calm. Riley found a kind of solace in that. Dana kept her head down and her eyes open. She did not ask Riley for explanations. She did not offer comfort. She offered presence. It was enough. One afternoon, Dana met Riley near the supply room, face serious. They reopened Evan's case officially. Riley's chest tightened. They should have years ago. Dana's gaze dropped. I know. Riley studied Dana's face. You feel guilty. Dana did not deny it. I watched you stand outside that bay. I told myself the hospital had done what it could. I told myself the story was true because it was easier to carry. Riley's voice stayed calm. Easy stories kill people. Dana's eyes lifted. That is why I am testifying. Riley nodded once. Me too. 6 weeks after the fire, federal court in Richmond looked nothing like a trauma bay, but Riley's body treated it the same. A room full of people, bright lights, the sense that one wrong breath could change everything. She wore a black suit that felt borrowed. In her bag was a photo of Evan in his graduation gown. She had stared at that photo until it stopped feeling like a memory and started feeling like a promise. Pierce walked beside her through security. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and cold air. Reporters gathered outside barriers, cameras raised like weapons. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Noah sat in the front row with Elaine. He looked thinner, paler, but alive. His eyes were sharp when they met Riley's. Elaine's face was composed again, but the composure was different. It was no longer a mask, it was armor. Dana sat behind them with a cluster of nurses. Their faces were set hard with loyalty and exhaustion. Riley saw residents too, some who had watched her be dismissed now watching her walk toward the witness stand with federal agents at her side. Dr. Grant Vickers sat at the defense table. He looked smaller than Riley remembered, not because he had changed, but because the room no longer belonged to him. His wrists were free now, but his posture carried the tension of a man who knew the floor beneath him was thin. When his eyes met Riley's, they were still cold. Still calculating. Still convinced the world owed him control. The prosecutor stood. Dr. Riley Shaw. Riley's throat tightened. She stepped forward and took the oath hand raised, voice steady. She sat, hands folded on the witness stand, and forced herself to breathe like she was in the trauma bay. The prosecutor's voice was clear. Dr. Shaw, can you describe the events of the night Noah Kincaid arrived at Harbor Point Medical Center? Riley took a breath. The patient arrived at 2:47 in the morning, she said. He was in cardiac arrest. Blue lips, no palpable pulse. Secret Service agents entered the trauma bay. We began resuscitation immediately. The prosecutor nodded. What did you observe that night that was unusual? Riley did not look at Vickers. She looked at the jury, at their faces, ordinary people asked to hold something ugly. I observed a puncture mark on the patient's neck, Riley said. It was not consistent with our interventions. It had surrounding tissue necrosis. I also observed pinpoint pupils and a respiratory failure pattern that suggested opioid involvement plus an additional agent. The prosecutor held up an image on a screen, a close-up photo of the puncture mark. Riley's stomach tightened. The wound looked small and terrifying in sterile clarity. What did you recommend? The prosecutor asked. I recommended a toxicology screen and administration of naloxone, Riley said. And what was the response? Riley paused. Dr. Vickers dismissed the recommendation. He instructed the team to follow standard Code Blue protocol and told me to stay in my lane. The prosecutor's voice stayed level. Did Dr. Vickers say anything that night that stood out to you? Riley felt the room lean in. He identified the patient as the president's son before any official identification was made in the trauma bay, Riley said. A murmur moved through the courtroom like wind through dry leaves. The prosecutor let the silence settle. Why was that significant to you? Because it indicated he had information he should not have had, Riley said. It suggested coordination. The prosecutor nodded. What happened next? Riley described the blackout, the red emergency lights, the sound of glass shattering. She described seeing Vickers' face in that moment. Relief. Just a flicker, but enough. She described the broken vial, the pooling liquid. She described ordering the vial preserved and toxicology initiated. Then she described the breach, the armed intrusion, the Secret Service agent with a gun, the attempt on Noah's life. As she spoke, she felt her heart rate climb again, but her voice stayed controlled. She did not dramatize. She did not plead. She laid out a timeline like a medical chart because charts saved lives and stories could be manipulated. The prosecutor asked, "Do you see the man who entered the trauma bay with a firearm?" Riley looked to the defense table where Lucas Kincaid sat now in a separate case-escorted expression flat. She pointed. "Yes." The prosecutor nodded. "What did the patient say during that breach?" Riley's throat tightened. "He said he recorded everything. That evidence was uploaded to multiple servers." The prosecutor moved on. "How did the events of that night relate to your brother Evan Shaw?" Riley felt the courtroom tighten. "My brother died in the same trauma bay 3 years earlier," Riley said. "The official cause was overdose. That night, when I saw the puncture mark and the residue, it reminded me of my brother's case." The prosecutor's voice softened slightly, not with pity, but with respect for the gravity. "Later, federal investigators informed you that Evan Shaw was murdered. Is that correct?" "Yes," Riley said. Her voice cracked on the word just a hair, then steadied. "And who did they identify as responsible?" Riley looked at Vickers then because truth deserved a face. Dr. Grant Vickers. Vickers' expression did not change. The defense attorney rose. Objection. The judge's voice was firm. Overruled. The prosecutor continued. "Dr. Shaw, how did you encounter Dr. Vickers after he was charged?" Riley's stomach tightened. "He was released on bail and returned to the hospital during a fire in the West Wing. He approached me in a corridor holding a syringe. He attempted to inject me. The prosecutor asked, 'Were you injured?' 'No.' 'And what happened to the syringe?' 'It fell,' Riley said. 'It was kicked away. It was recovered by agents.' The prosecutor nodded. 'Was the substance in that syringe tested?' 'Yes,' Riley said. The prosecutor held up another exhibit. Lab results, technical words, translated into plain testimony. It matched components found in Noah's system, Riley said. It also matched what investigators later found tied to my brother's death. Riley felt the room breathe differently. People understood patterns. They understood repeated harm. The prosecutor finished direct examination and sat. The defense attorney stood slowly, as if rising from a place of certainty. He approached the witness stand with a calm smile that did not reach his eyes. He looked at Riley's face, then at her hands. "Dr. Shaw," he said, "you are a resident." "Correct." "Yes," Riley said. "Not board certified." "I'm in training," Riley said. 24 years old, he said, voice carrying slightly. "That is very young for the kind of decisions you claim to have made that night." Riley felt the insult attempt to dig hooks into old wounds. Too young, too emotional, too soft. She kept her voice level. "Physiology does not change based on my age." The attorney smiled faintly. "You have personal trauma in that hospital. Your brother died there." "Yes," Riley said. "Is it possible," he continued, "that your judgment was clouded? That you saw conspiracy where there was none?" Riley's gaze did not waver. "I saw a puncture mark. I saw necrosis. I saw pinpoint pupils. I saw a blackout and a shattered vial. I saw an armed intruder. Those were not emotional interpretations. Those were observations." The attorney leaned closer. "You admit you were afraid." "I was," Riley said. "So you panicked." Riley's voice stayed steady. "I acted." He shifted tactics. "You used a defibrillator in a manner not intended by manufacturer design." Riley did not blink. "I used the tools available to protect a patient from imminent harm." The attorney's smile tightened. "Is it true you disliked Dr. Vickers?" Riley felt heat rise in her chest. She did not let it reach her voice. "This is not about my feelings." "Is it true," the attorney pressed, "that Dr. Vickers criticized your performance during residency?" Riley met his gaze. He criticized my existence. A ripple moved through the courtroom. The judge's gavel tapped once. Order. The attorney straightened. So you had motive to accuse him. Riley's jaw tightened. My motive was to keep a child alive. The attorney's eyes narrowed. You are claiming a respected surgeon is part of a network involving government corruption, procurement fraud, and murder. I'm describing what I saw and what evidence has confirmed, Riley said. He pivoted again. You did not personally test any substances. No, Riley said. So your conclusions rely on others. My medical actions relied on clinical signs, Riley said. The laboratory confirmed the compounds. The attorney tried to control the room with his tone. Dr. Shaw, you are asking this jury to believe you, a young resident, over a surgeon with decades of experience. Riley's gaze moved to the jurors. I am asking you to believe what happened. Experience does not make a person immune to wrongdoing. The attorney studied her for a moment, then stepped back as if he could not find another angle that would not backfire. No further questions, he said. Riley sat back, breath-controlled hands folded. Her heart thudded, but she felt something settle inside her. She had spoken. She had not been silenced. The courtroom did not feel safe, but it felt honest. Over the next days, other witnesses testified. Dana spoke with the blunt clarity of a nurse who had seen enough to stop being impressed by titles. She described Vickers' blocking toxicology. She described his behavior during the blackout. She described the moment he tried to leave when the bay was locked down. The lab tech explained the toxicology in plain language. Opioids, neuromuscular blocker signatures, a compound consistent with restricted clinical access. Noah testified, voice stronger, now gaze steady. He described the pinch, the paralysis, the friendly voice, the name that was spoken to draw him into vulnerability. He described the decision to upload evidence because he knew he would not get a second chance to speak. Elaine testified last, and her presence filled the room like quiet thunder. She did not cry on the stand. She did not perform grief. She spoke like someone who had learned that truth could be a weapon. She admitted her fear. She admitted she told Noah to stay quiet. She described the discovery of corruption. She described the moment she realized protection did not mean safety. When closing arguments ended, Riley sat in a side room with Pierce and Dana and waited. Waiting felt worse than fighting. In a trauma bay, you had steps. In a hallway fight, you had instinct. In a courtroom, you had nothing but time. After 6 hours, the bailiff called them back in. The jury filed in. Their faces carried the weight of what they had heard. The foreperson stood. On all counts, she said, voice steady, we find the defendant guilty. Riley felt her lungs seize for a second as if her body did not believe it. Vickers did not react. No flinch, no collapse, no anger. He sat like a man listening to a diagnosis he expected. The judge read the sentence. Consecutive life terms. No possibility of parole. When the bailiffs led him away, Vickers turned his head slightly. His eyes found Riley's. There was no remorse. There was something else colder. A recognition. A final attempt to remind her that systems outlived individuals. Riley held his gaze until he was gone. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded the steps. Cameras flashed. Microphones pushed forward. Dr. Shaw, someone shouted. How does it feel to bring down Dr. Vickers? Riley blinked against the bright sun. The air smelled like summer pavement and exhaust. No smoke, no antiseptic, no ozone. It felt wrong to be in normal air after weeks of crisis. She saw Noah and Elaine nearby, guarded but present. Noah's eyes met hers. He nodded once. Not a performance. A simple acknowledgement. Dana stood behind Riley, hand near her elbow, like she was still ready to pull her out of danger. Pierce stayed close, scanning the crowd like it was a hallway that needed clearing. A reporter pushed closer. Dr. Shaw, are you going back to Harbor Point? Riley looked at the microphones and thought of the trauma bay, the scuffed linoleum, the hum of fluorescent lights, the code alarms, the place where Evan died and where Noah lived because she refused to stay quiet. "Yes," Riley said. Her voice was calm. "I am going back to work." Another reporter shouted, "Are you afraid?" Riley paused. Fear was not a headline. Fear was a physical thing that lived in muscles and lungs in the way your hands shook after you stopped moving. "I am careful," she said. Pierce guided her toward the car before the questions could turn into demands. Back at Harbor Point, the West Wing smelled like new paint and burned memories. Some corridors were closed behind temporary walls. Construction sounds replaced the hum of normal hospital life. The building repaired itself the way bodies tried to slowly imperfectly. Riley walked the halls with agents nearby, not obvious but present. Staff looked at her differently now, some with respect, some with resentment, some with fear, as if proximity to her might draw the machine back into the building. She did not address it. She did not have the energy. She worked. She learned. She ran codes with calm hands. One evening, after a shift that lasted too long, Riley sat alone in the call room with Evan's photo in her hand. The edges were soft from being touched. She traced the outline of his smile with a thumb and felt the ache of years shift into something less sharp. The door opened quietly. Dana stepped in holding 2 cups of coffee. Dana placed one on the table. "Do not ask where I got it. The cafeteria closes early now." Riley almost smiled. Everything closes early now. Dana sat across from her. "Elaine wants to meet you." Riley's stomach tightened. Why, Dana's eyes stayed steady. "She is forming something. Oversight, independent review. A way to keep suspicious deaths from being filed away." Riley stared at her coffee. "That is ambitious." Dana's voice was blunt. "So are you." Riley held the cup between her hands, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. "I do not want speeches, I want policies that work." Dana nodded. "Then you should be in the room." Riley exhaled slowly. "I will go." Dana stood. "Good." When Dana left, Riley sat alone again, listening to the distant sounds of the hospital. Call bells, footsteps, the muted beeping of monitors that never stopped. Her phone buzzed. A message came through from a blocked number. "You stopped one doctor." Riley's throat tightened. Her eyes stayed on the screen, not the machine. Riley read it once, then again. The words were simple. The intent was not. She set the phone down without replying. She deleted the message. Then she turned the phone face down like she was turning over a card she refused to play. Riley picked up Evan's photo, and slid it back into her bag. Outside the call room, the hallway lights glowed steady. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and new drywall like a place trying to heal. Riley walked back toward the ER.